Hello and welcome everyone back to East of the Rockies, the WCBN softball podcast here on WCBN Sports. My name is Charlie Brigham. Down there is Kelin Flynn, and we have a lot to talk about today. How are you doing today, though, Kelin?
I'm great. Super warm day here, so excited to be in some 50-degree weather. But yeah, let's get right into it. A lot to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. We talked about how nervous we were to go back into the cold. Like the entire weekend we were down in Tampa. And to be fair, when we did get back, it was freezing at the airport, and Kelin wore shorts like a psycho. But it was warm today. Yeah, like you said, like 45, 50 degrees. Again, just hi. Thank you all for tuning in. This episode is currently being live streamed on our YouTube channel at WCBN Sports on YouTube, and this will be recorded, uploaded as a video here, and then the audio will also be uploaded on SoundCloud. So if you like to listen to your podcast there, it will be available there as well. And as you can see next to me, make sure to drop a question in the chat. We'll have a whole segment dedicated to that a little bit later in the episode. But like you said, Kelin, we have a lot to talk about. So let's get right into things, shall we? So looking back at last weekend, Michigan Wolverines go down to Tampa, Florida for the opening USF Rawlings Invitational, and there was a lot to be seen, some bittersweet emotions, but let's just get right into the game recaps, shall we? Game number 1, currently at the time number 16 ranked Michigan Wolverines came hot out of the gates against Kansas City. Megan Beaubien had an incredible game through 5 innings, had 8 strikeouts. And she looked really, really good. Team put up 6 runs, like I said. Started off with a bang. Christina Burkhart had an incredible day. Started off with a double, ended up on second base. Taylor Bump knocked one over the fence to put Michigan up 2-0, and that's all they needed. It was just a really fun game to watch overall. Mia Hovland for Kansas City kind of had. I mean, that was a rough start. You know, you give up a 2-run home run right at the start of the game, and then Michigan just kind of took off from there. The offensive leaders for Michigan in that one: Christina Burkhart, 3 for 4 up at the plate with a double and an RBI. Lauren Essman, 3 for 4 with 2 doubles and an RBI. Taylor Bump, 1 for 4 with that home run and 2 RBIs. Lexi Voss also hit a double. Hannah Carson had an RBI. So, I mean, the Michigan Bats were the hottest they were all weekend right in that first game.
Yeah, they got out of the gates hot. You mentioned Taylor Bump with the 2-run shot early. I mean, they got going. Beaubien was dominant the entire time she was in. And then we saw a lot out of some of the newer players, like you mentioned, Burkhart, some of the freshmen. Durkowski came in and had some nice innings toward the end there to kind of shut the door. So things were really clicking that entire first day. I mean, they just looked dominant. And granted, it wasn't against quite as high of competition, but they looked really, really solid on day 1.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Lauren Durkowski. Durkowski came in to pitch the last 2, pitched 6 and 7, had 5 strikeouts in 2 innings of work, and like you said, she looked really good. Struck out the side 1 inning. So great to see from the young Michigan pitching staff. But immediately following that 6-0 victory over Kansas City, Michigan got right back at it with a 4-1 win over Illinois State. Again, Bats stayed hot. Ella McVeigh, the freshman, had a day at the plate, 2 for 2 with a double. Christina Burkhart went 1 for 3 with 2 RBIs. Lexi Blair had a double and an RBI. That was Lexi's first hit and one of her very few of the tournament. We'll discuss that in a little bit. But again, not too much to talk about there besides the fact that Alex Dorocco, when she's on, is basically untouchable. I mean, threw a complete game, had 18 strikeouts. It was incredible.
Yeah, she was just dominant. Illinois State just could not touch her. I think they had like 3 or 4 hits, and almost all of them were very fluky. I think there was one bunt, one that just went right back to Storako, and she couldn't catch it. Like, it was just really fluky stuff. She was dominant the whole game. There was nothing they could do about it, and the Bats did what they needed to do to get her a couple runs, and Storako did the rest.
Yeah, Illinois State really only made solid contact like 2 or 3 times. You mentioned that one hit. It was a line drive right back at Rocco. She put a glove on it, but just a little bit too hot to handle. But again, that first day, it was the vibes were high. Michigan was rolling, up 2-0 on the weekend, and we were hoping that momentum would carry over into the game against Florida, but not so lucky. Not so lucky on Michigan's
Yeah.
end. So getting right into that one, Michigan at the time had bumped up from number 16 in the nation to number 13. So this one, a top 15 matchup with Florida at number 5, and Michigan just couldn't get anything going on the offensive end. To Florida's credit, Lexi Delbrey, their freshman who started in the circle, was unbelievable. Only let up 1 hit, had 5 strikeouts, and at that time she one hit a red hot Wolverines offense.
Yeah, she was incredible. We talked about on the broadcast how we weren't really sure what we were going to see out of her, and we weren't really expecting to see her against Michigan. But there she was, and we quickly found out why they threw her, because she was just dominant. Like you said, 1 hit, and that 1 hit was in the bottom of the 7th. Lucky, I don't know if to say lucky, but a single from Hannah Carson, I believe. So she was dominant that entire game. And Alex Storako, aside from that 1 inning, was exceptional as well. But she walked a couple, and Hutch made the decision to take her out, and it kind of went downhill from there. But, I mean, those are the decisions you live with.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Stracco looked really good in her work up until that 1 inning. Had 9 strikeouts in 5 2/3 innings. Got pulled in in her 5 2/3 inning of work. Had walked the bases, or had loaded the bases. Had 1 walk. So we bring in Bobien with bases loaded. She got up 1-2 in the count, and then just left the changeup a little bit too far on the plate. And a good hitter in this Florida lineup in Lindsay is just going to punish you every time. Hit a grand slam, and Florida only needed 1, but ended up winning that one 4-0. But a bright spot in that game, the fact that Annabelle Weidra came into pitch, and she looked good. She only threw 1 inning, only gave up 1 hit, but against a very good Florida team, that's something you like to see out of your freshman.
Yeah, I mean, as a true freshman, game was essentially over at that point. The Michigan bats had done nothing, and Delbrey had been dominating. But we just came in and did what she was asked to do. She stopped the bleeding, and I mean, you can't ask for much else at that point in a game that was kind of lost. You just like to pick out the bright spots, and that was definitely one of the few bright spots for Michigan in that game.
So following up that one, Michigan was going to look to bounce back. This next game was the last one we at WCBN Sports were able to cover last week, and unfortunately we got 4 out of 5. But Michigan faces off against the hosting USF Bulls and loses that one 4-1. Now, Kelin, we had talked about it a bit. So at the time, and still now, USF is unranked. But with Georgina Korick in the circle, I mean, they're one of the best teams in softball.
It's a completely different team. I mean, it's a top 3 pitcher in the nation, probably.
Yeah, I would say so.
There's not a lot you can do about that. If you give up a couple, then she's probably not going to open the door for you. So you need to take advantage of anything you can get, and the Wolverines couldn't really. And I mean, yeah, it's just what it is. They're at home. They've got the crowd, and the Wolverines traveled well, but they're the home team. They've got their ace on the mound. She got an award before the game. She broke the conference all-time strikeout record. Like, she was just absolutely dealing, and there's nothing we could do about it.
Yeah, and with a strong defensive lineup around her, with players like Maldonado and the rest of them, it's going to be tough to win games where you can't get the bats going. But Michigan was able to knock in 4 or 5 hits against Korick, 2 doubles, 1 from Burkhart, 1 from Sealer. So there are some bright spots, and again, want to bring up the freshman pitching for Michigan. Lauren Durkowski and Annabelle Weidra were the only 2 who threw that game. Durkowski threw 4 innings, Weidra threw 2. And they look good. 6 combined strikeouts between the 2 of them. And, against you mentioned, a South Florida team who is, definitely a good team, and especially with the have home field advantage. They had packed out the stands. Korick was humming. She got the award before the game. Like, that's a lot, and that's like an intimidating atmosphere. And for 2 freshmen to come in and they hadn't really had much work up until that point and throw a really good outing. Like, that's something you love to see.
Yeah, I was really impressed with a lot of the freshmen, specifically Ellie Sealer. She made a ton of incredible grabs in left field. I know we're going to talk about that later, but in that on day two, she made some incredible grabs. One literally like reaching over the fence and foul territory in left field to haul one in. I mean, those are the kind of things that down the line are going to be huge for this team. Having some elite defensive players in different spots across the field, and especially from freshmen, because a lot of those are big question marks going into the year, and so that gives you confidence going forward in these younger players in your team.
Yeah, definitely. Moving into the last game, which was in the morning of Super Bowl Sunday, Michigan was able to bounce back after the two losses to the Florida teams with a 2-0 victory. They played Kansas City again. Alex Dorocco started, had another incredible outing through the whole game, only let up 3 hits, 13 strikeouts. I mean, there wasn't much of a chance. If we're being real, it wasn't much of a chance for Kansas City with Alex Dorocco in the circle. The Michigan Bats came to life again. Christina Burkhart went 3 for 4 with an RBI. Weidra went 2 for 3. Essman went 1 for 3 with an RBI. So, again, just Michigan bounces back. Tough losses against some pretty good teams, but going to look to keep that momentum from that last Kansas City game moving forward into next weekend. Before we get there, I just want to kind of hit some points and answer some questions that we had coming into this opening tournament, the USF Rawlings Invitational. We had mentioned on last week's episode that there were going to have to be some people who stepped up on the offensive end with the absence, of Lou Allen this year as she transferred to Liberty. And I mean, I think everyone was able to see that Christina Burkhart, what a pickup that was. She looked absolutely incredible. On the weekend, I have it pulled up, 8 for 17 with 2 doubles, 4 RBIs, 2 stolen bases. I mean, she came into this Michigan lineup, and in her first weekend of work, it looks like she hadn't skipped a beat.
Oh my gosh, it was incredible. I mean, she came out of the gates red hot in that first day. I know we talked about it a couple times on the broadcast, but it felt like every time Taylor Bump was up at the plate, Burkhart was standing on second, whether it be a double or drawing a walk and stealing second or singling and stealing second. She was just always on second base.
Yeah.
And that's a huge boost to your off, especially at the top of the order there, to consistently have somebody on base and scoring position for your power hitters. That's exactly what the Wolverines need.
Yeah, I mean, thinking back to that first game especially, Taylor Bump got up to the plate 4 times, and 3 out of the 4 times she stepped up to the plate, Christina Burkhart was standing on second base. Like, that's just something you love to see out of the top of your order. Moving on a little bit, some other questions we had was, who was going to fill in the defensive holes for Michigan? Because last year, Michigan lost pretty much their entire infield. They lost the middle infield and first baseman and right fielder. So, there were questions there, and I think all of those were answered immediately. Lauren Essman, typically last year, played, the outfield. She moves to first base. Aside from that one play where she pulled her foot against, I'm pretty sure it was USF. She looked fine over at first base. We mentioned Christina Burkhart. She didn't really have to do too much on the defensive end, but looked good and right. Ellie Sealer, who you mentioned, she was just a vacuum in left field. I mean, she had 2 incredible plays in, that left field corner. The one sliding after a foul ball, the one running into the tarp. I mean, it seemed like everything coming her way, she was tracking it down.
Yeah, she was incredible. I mean, I already talked about it, so I don't want to just repeat myself, but she was phenomenal. I saw something in the chat asking if her D is the real deal. I mean, absolutely, I think so. From everything she showed over the weekend, I think all signs are pointing that she's going to be an absolute stud defensively in left field. And she's only a freshman, so she's only going to get better. And you mentioned the middle infield. Weidra and Mcveigh both looked really solid. McVeigh is just an absolute lightning bolt. Like, she is so fast, and defensively that's been huge because there were a couple balls that she was able to make plays on that I don't think every shortstop is able to make that play.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big question mark coming into the season because Natalia Rodriguez has been, that rock at shortstop for the past few years, and she had that same kind of, electric athleticism where if there was a ball that was kind of in no man's land, she was going to get it. And Ella McVeigh just looked just as fast. She had that lone run against USF where she stole second, and stole third, and ended up getting brought home as the ball went out of play. But just that kind of speed and quickness is just so helpful to a team because it just keeps people on their toes. And you mentioned Annabelle Weidra at second base. She looked as solid as they come. Both were playing or hitting really well at the plate too. So I think those questions are answered. I have kind of my little best defensive lineup for Michigan right now here. I kind of want to just go over quick. In my eyes, Michigan best defensively. Obviously, Storako in the circle, Hannah Carson behind the plate, Lauren Essman at first, Weidra at second, McVeigh at short, Taylor Bump at third, and then left to right in the outfield, Ellie Sealer, Lexi Blair, Christina Burkhart. Pretty much what we saw for a majority of the weekend. I think Michigan's really got it figured out in the defensive end. And then DH spot, I threw Lexi Voss in there. She looked good in her time.
Yeah, you mentioned Taylor Bump at third. We didn't talk about her defensively yet, but she made a couple incredible grabs, especially in that first day. Had a couple nice leaping grabs, and I think she dove for one that was coming in short. So she made some nice plays defensively too. I think, yeah, defensively the Wolverines looked phenomenal the whole weekend, outside for that one error from Essman at first.
Yeah, they looked really, really good. And you mentioned that diving play from Taylor Bump. That was immediately following up her 2-run home run in the first game of the season too. So that's just something you love to see. Not afraid to put her body on the line. One other note that I had mentioned or that I had written down is I wouldn't mind seeing Michigan shake up the order a little bit. And specifically, I would really like to see what Ella McVeigh could do in the leadoff spot. We mentioned her speed. If she could get on base, and then I would say everyone just kind of bumps down one spot from there. So top of the order would be like McVeigh, Blair, Burkhart, Bump, and then Hannah Carson fifth. But I think with her speed at the top of the order, and Lexi Blair is going to get rolling here very shortly. She made super solid contact all season, all weekend, just couldn't seem to find gaps. But then with McVeigh on base to start, and then Blair and Bump and Burkhart and all them coming up after, that's murderer's row.
Yeah, I really like that because, like you said, that gives you great, because McVeigh was making great contact all weekend. She was getting on base, and so with her speed, she's been able to take extra bases once on the base path. So throw in Blair behind her, like you mentioned, she's just going to get going. I mean, she's too good of a player to continue to have this kind of slump. And then Burkhart, like we've already talked about, looked electric. Taylor Bump led the team in home runs last year. Have her in that 4 spot. I think that's a great option for the Wolverines going forward.
My last note before we move on to the questions from the chat is just, we already mentioned it, but Lauren Dorkowski and Annabelle Weidra looked really, really good. And I see a question, so we're going to get right into the questions in the chat. If you'd like to drop one, we will make sure to answer it. So I guess we'll get right to that. It says, from Stuart Berlow, Weidra was throwing fire on Saturday. Think she and Dirk will be in the rotation full time? I would think so. I mean, they looked really good. Obviously, Storako and Beaubien are two of the best in the country. But the fact that now, especially after that first weekend, you kind of get a sense of what is going on. You look at the reinforcements that Michigan has in Lauren Dorkowski and Annabelle Weidra, and I feel really confident in them being able to come in for an inning or two at the end of a game, or if they need to come in relief if Beaubien and Storako are struggling, and that way you can save those arms. It's not a situation where if Storako is struggling, you need to throw in Beaubien, or if Beaubien is struggling, you need to throw in Storako. Now you have 3 viable options to come in relief, which I think is huge.
Yeah, it just offers so much depth, and it's way less predictable. I mean, it just gives you options to play with, and like you said, if you don't want to necessarily use an arm, then you Beaubien or Storako in relief of the other. Well, you have 2 other options that have shown to be really solid in relief situations, and in the case of Dorkowski, even starting She looks really, really good. So I think Durkowski especially looked like a very, very viable relief option going forward, and I think I can really see her sliding into that role for the rest of the season.
Another question from the chat says, "Is it possible Burkhart is the best hitter on the team?" I, you know, after this weekend, it wouldn't be. It definitely is not out of the cards. I mean, you can't disrespect Lexi Blair and say, she's not a top hitter on this team, especially after hitting over 400 multiple times in her career. Slow start to the weekend, but that top of the order, I mean, we mentioned it. Blair, Burkhart, bump when she gets going, and Carson. I mean, that is murderer's row. Christina Burkhart, 8-17 with 2 doubles and 4 RBIs in your first weekend of work with a brand new team. That's incredible.
And against a couple of really solid pitchers, especially in that second day. Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. We've only seen her for a weekend, and she looked like the best hitter on the team, and it's her first couple games in a Wolverine uniform, so I don't think you can't say it's possible, but you definitely still have to respect Lexi Blair and everything she's done since she's been here. But it's definitely a possibility.
Another question says, "How did you gentlemen enjoy the luxurious Donaldson deck?" USF is such a great complex, just overall. The Donaldson deck is, one of, if not the best view in the ballpark, especially with the baseball field right behind it. We mentioned, quick little anecdote for anyone who missed the broadcast the other day. Between games it was day 2, correct?
I think so, yeah.
Between the Florida and the USF game.
No, it was day 1.
It was. Oh yes, you're correct. So it was between Kansas City and Illinois State. Michigan was coming off a win, and Kelin and I were just messing around between games, and Kelin heard it first and went over. But long story short, on the USF baseball field directly behind us, Aaron Judge of the New York Yankees was taking batting practice. So we sat there for the entire time between games just watching him, and it was unreal.
He hit the ball about 7,000 feet.
It was ridiculous. I think the corners were like 320, and there was a road well beyond that, and he was just bombing balls over the road. It was unreal.
Yeah, that might have been the craziest part of the weekend.
It was one of my favorite parts, for sure. Another question from the chat. Sealer's D was ridiculous. Is she the real deal? I mean, Kelin, I think we already answered this, but she looks like it. I mean, she played practically flawlessly in the outfield. I would even go as far as to say she was flawless in left field, tracking down balls in foul territory, making the right reads. One of the most impressive plays I saw out of her wasn't necessarily like an athletic feat, but I'm pretty sure it was Florida had runners on second and third with 1 out, and somebody popped one up in foul territory, and she tracked it down and shifted her body before she even caught the ball, so that when she caught it, she was just ready to throw home. And just her doing that kept the runner at third base. I mean, that's just a high IQ play that you don't expect out of a freshman, but you love to see it.
Yeah, I already talked about it. I mean, you said flawless. Like she made no mistakes and did even more than she was asked of in left field. Like, from what we've seen so far, definitely the real deal.
And then another question, which brings us to our next point. Oklahoma State, Florida State, UCF, and LSU is a crazy schedule, but is that a 4-0 in football? Honestly, with the way Michigan played last year and hopefully into next year, I would say so. But
Oklahoma State's defense was really good, but probably.
But that's going to take us right into our next few points. Michigan, after going 3-2 in the opening weekend at the USF Rawlings Invitational, has their work cut out for them at the Clearwater Invitational next weekend. 4 games, all 4 games are top 25 matchups. The first one against number 7 Oklahoma State. The second one against number 24 UCF, who has to be riding high. They knocked off number 13 Georgia 7-6 in extra innings on a walk-off home run. I mean, we will watch the clip, Kelin, of Shannon Doherty hitting that walk-off. She pimped that ball. Like, that thing was absolutely crushed. Last 2 matchups, probably the marquee matchup of the weekend. Michigan going up against number 5 Florida State. Florida State has moved up in the rankings, and then number 21 LSU to wrap things up. So Michigan definitely has their work cut out for them. All really, really good programs, and they better win at least two, because another little note. Hutch is 2 wins away from again reaching the top of all of NCAA college softball in wins. She will be the winningest coach in softball history. Currently, her record is 1,672 in 535 with 5 ties over her 39 seasons, which is unreal. First of all,
that's ridiculous.
Whether you're in second place or not, that's absolutely unreal. Currently, as I said, only 2 wins behind Arizona's Mike Candrea, who's Hall of Famer, 8-time NCAA champion. He retired last season. So Hutch is knocking on the door.
Yeah, she's right there. And obviously it would have been really nice to get that at USF last weekend, but didn't happen, wasn't in the cards. So it'd definitely be sweet to get that over in a big ranked matchup against Florida State, an LSU, a UCF. So hopefully they can get it done at Clearwater.
Question from the chat: how do you forecast our record in Clearwater? 4-0 or 3-0 with a rain out? Like I said, Michigan's gonna have their work cut out for them, but the way they've played defensively and the way their pitching has been just executing, on. Sorry, excuse me. The way their pitching has just been executing, they've got a shot to go 4-0. It's really just a question of if the bats are going to show up. We saw it in both games against Kansas City. We saw it against Illinois State. Michigan has the players to do it. I mean, we mentioned Burkhart a lot. Lexi Blair it's pretty much an any day now thing when she's going to get going, and the pieces are all there. It's just if they all come together in a timely manner.
Yeah, clearly, I think Florida's probably better than all of those teams. They're up to number 3 now, and outside of 1 inning, Stracco handled Florida well. So I don't think it's out of the question to say the Wolverines have a great weekend and go 3-1, 4-0. It won't be easy though, obviously, for ranked matchups, but it's definitely a possibility. They have great pitching, like you said. Just will the bats show up? Because with Stracco and Bobby, and you don't necessarily need a ton out of the offense. You just need a little bit to give them some insurance and just let your 2 dominant arms go to work.
Yeah, and there's gonna need to be people who step up. We mentioned Lauren Durkowski and Annabelle Weidra. Definitely gonna see some innings of work next weekend at the Clearwater Invitational. Unfortunately, we at WCBN won't be down there. Some of the WCBN East of the Rocky veterans will be down there. But yeah, it should be a fun weekend. Those games are televised. I can pull that up really quickly for everyone at home in case you want to check those out without us being down there to provide you better coverage than what you'll get on ESPN. But let's see. The Friday matchups, 10 a.m. versus Oklahoma State, will be televised on ESPNU. 3 p.m. game against UCF, will be on ESPN Plus. The Saturday games, the 1 p.m. game against Florida State will be on the ACC network, and the 5 p.m. game versus LSU will be on ESPN Plus. One more question in the chat says 10 pitches from Stracco. How many does Judge hit out? I don't even know how to answer that. If it's just pure strength, Aaron Judge will crush any ball thrown his way. But I have a feeling Stracco could slice him up. I mean, have you seen the video of Jenny Finch just absolutely dicing Albert Pujols?
I've never seen that.
No. You can look it up. Just go on YouTube and look up Jenny Finch and Albert Pujols, and she just absolutely dices him up. Makes him look like a little leaguer. It's pure comedy.
It's definitely going to be different just because the angle that the ball comes out is different. But at the same time, Aaron Judge is Aaron Judge. I think and that ball is way bigger. I think pretty much anything he gets a hold of is gone. She might slide a couple past him, but I think most of those are going out.
I don't know. That would be fun to see. Little exhibition matchup. But Kelin, unless you have anything else, I'm pretty much all wrapped up here.
No, really, big weekend coming up, but yeah, I think that's all there is from Tampa. Now just eyes set on Clearwater.
Yeah, definitely looking forward. Should be a fun time. Again, I mentioned all 4 games will be televised, so unfortunately without our coverage, you're going to have to turn to TV, which isn't ideal, but at least there is the option. So with that is going to do it for this week's episode of Season 5, Episode 2 of East of the Rockies. If you want to follow us on any social media, you can check right below me on the video feed on YouTube at www.wcbnsports.org for our website. You can check out articles, follow up with our Twitter feed, see pictures. Bethany Furness of WCBN Sports took some incredible pictures this year at Michigan football games and Michigan basketball games, and those are all up on our website, so make sure to go check those out. And for more content from us, at WCBN Sports Radio on Instagram, and follow us on Twitter to make sure you're kept up with everything else we do at WCBN Sports on Twitter. My @ on Twitter, I will drop it in the live chat really quickly. If you'd like to follow up with me there, it's at CBIII_10. And Kelin, if you want to drop yours as well. But for that's pretty much going to do it. It's been a fun weekend for sure. And looking forward, Michigan has some bright spots for sure coming into the rest of the season. But with that, my name is Charlie Brigham, and alongside me it has been Kelin Flynn, and we are going to leave you for this episode of East of the Rockies like we always do, with a thank you, a good night, and a go blue. We will see you all later.